Okay, that number has stopped increasing, so I think that we are ready to go. It sounds like everybody's made it in from the waiting room and gotten their audio going. My name is Wendy Benverlo. I'm the Executive Director of NAPSA. It is my distinct honor and pleasure, as always, to be here with you today. I'm really excited for the presentation that we have on NAPSA accreditation. Since I think probably you all know, but I've been with the organization just a little bit under 2 years, and I can say one of the most common topics that comes up when people are talking about NAPSA is interest in accreditation and what that is and how you can achieve that with your jurisdiction. And so I'm really excited today to bring you some of the members of the Accreditation Commission who are going to talk about that more in depth. There's been a lot of interest, and so hopefully we can continue to have that grow and continue to grow our field. Just a couple of quick things, updates on NAPSA. We do have another webinar scheduled for a couple of weeks from now, and that is, I'm going to throw it in the chat right now, Pretrial 101. This is actually an overview of a day-long session that we're going to have at the conference. It's one of the special Sunday sessions that will be approximately 5 or 6 hours on the Sunday right before we start the conference this fall. So if you have any interest in that, that will be the webinar that will be next month. I believe it's on June 4th. So please join us and check out that link there in the website, or I'm sorry, in the chat. Also, just if you didn't know, our conference registration is open right now. Our conference is in Reno, Nevada this year, starting August 30th through September 2nd. And you can find a lot of information on our website. I will also throw that in the chat, including two things that are kind of timely right now. And that is we are currently accepting applications for scholarships to the conference. And the scholarship does cover travel costs as well as the registration fee. The applications for the scholarships are being accepted through May 27th. So have a couple more weeks. If you're interested in that, please get your applications in. And same for our award nominations. The award nominations are open right now. We're accepting those nominations also through May 27th. And so if you have, it's a great time to celebrate our field, to celebrate the professionals that really shape our field and do such amazing work. And so please consider nominating a colleague, and we will celebrate together then on Sunday night, August 30th, with giving out those awards. So again, you can find all that information on our website, and you can always reach out to me if you have any questions. So last thing about this webinar, and that is you can definitely chat with each other in the chat. That should be fully accessible to you. But if you have questions for our panelists, if you could go to the bottom of the screen, should be the Q&A section, and you put the questions in there. It just is a lot easier for our panelists to keep track of the questions and answer you and make sure that we can get to all your questions. So again, just want to thank you for being here. And now I want to turn it over to the Accreditation Commission and to my colleague, Ed Gordon.
Thanks, Wendy. Appreciate the introduction. Yeah, thank you everybody for being here. Just a quick introduction to myself. I'll turn it over to James and he'll get us kicked off just with some information about the big picture accreditation process, and then later in the presentation, I'll take you through some of the more nitty-gritty as you attempt to are interested in seeing what the actual process would look like as you go forward. So, again, I'm Ed Gordon. I am one of the co-founders of Justice Point. We are actually a nonprofit pretrial services agency headquartered at least in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We actually have offices and programs throughout Wisconsin, into the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and more recently into the Upper Peninsula and mainland Michigan. So we've been growing. I have been in the pretrial field since 2003, so about 23 years now, in one fashion or another. Something I've been very passionate about, and I began my involvement with the accreditation process back in 2018. So have some experience doing it. Have touched most of the accredited sites that we currently have accredited, and would like to throw out there too. My contact information is at the end of the presentation. But if there are questions specifically about what things look like day to day, James and I are more than happy to talk with anybody that has questions about the process and what it would look like. So, James, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, for that introduction. Like I said, my name is James Owens. I work here in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, which is Charlotte. I am currently the program manager for our pretrial services here. I've been in pretrial now since 2015, so right around 11 years. I've been with the accreditation team since 2019, and I'm also involved with NAPSA Education Committee. Definitely love the work that NAPSA is doing, so have been, greatly appreciative of getting involved um, with the organization and definitely love the accreditation piece. It's been a Sean LaGregor, who is our accreditation chair, has really um, moved this ship along with accreditation, and looking forward to just going through some things with you guys today about accreditation and how to get things started with NAPSA accreditation. So today we will be looking at some of our presentation goals. Um, And those goals will be just to, what is it? What is NAPSA agency accreditation? Why should your agency consider accreditation? What would the process look like to attain accreditation? And how do I begin the process? So we would definitely hit all of these goals of how to how to get accreditation started, what it looks like. We will go through the history of accreditation as well. And definitely, if you have questions, please drop it in the chat. As we go on to the next slide, we will talk a little bit about the history of accreditation. Um, Accreditation assessors were assigned to Maine Pretrial Services in 2011, and they started that accreditation process there in Maine, and that process continued through 2012. In 2013, Maine Pretrial Services received their former accreditation status from NAPSA. Um, and then in 2014, the state of Connecticut became the first statewide agency to be accredited. Since that time frame, we have six agencies that have became accredited through NAPSA. They include Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, Maine Pretrial Services, the state of Connecticut, DeKalb County, Illinois, Alachua County, Florida, and most recently, as of last year, El Paso, Texas. And we also have two jurisdictions that are in the process, and they're well in the process of they're going through their accreditation process right now, and that is Lewis and Clark County, Montana, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So when talking about accreditation and the black letter standards, um, yes, there are two different standards when we look at things, and I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about what's the difference in the standards. So NAPSA Black Letter Standards, of course, was developed by the NAPSA Standard Committee. They represent the national best practices for potential services and agencies. The NAPSA standards provides guidance on effective and evidence-based pretrial operations. And the standards focus on improving outcomes and fairness and public safety. The standards serve as a framework for agency growth and consistency. The accreditation standards, the NAPSA accreditation standards are nationally recognized. They are benchmarks used to just evaluate the quality, the effectiveness, and professionalism of pretrial services agencies. The standards help us ensure agencies are operating with evidence-based practices. They're operating under the legal compliance. They are accountable and fairness and in the criminal justice system. The key areas covered in the National Accreditation Agency Organization and Administration, the pretrial release decision making, public safety assessment and risk practices, individual rights and due process, the case management and supervision, data collection and quality assurance, training and professional development, and collaboration with justice partner. Ed will go over some more of those as we go over the standards, the four standards that we have for accreditation. To just sum it up, NAPSA Black Letter Standards help define best practices while accreditation standards help verify and recognize agencies that successfully implement those. Going into our next slide, and we're just talking about um, why accreditation? Why do we look to use accreditation, and what is the benefits of accreditation? Accreditation helps make our industry more professional by setting clear standards or or how agencies should operate. It shows that agencies are committed to doing quality work and treating people fairly, following best practices, and continuing improving their services. Accreditation gives agencies a clear roadmap to how to do their work the right way every day. It helps everyone to stay on the same page and follow good practices, stay organized, and keep improving the services they provide. And I will go into some more details on the next slide about that as well. Accreditation professionalizes our industry. It definitely looks at, recognizing the standards, promoting the accountability, and the ethical practices. And it reinforced the importance of consistency in training and using the evidence-based operation. It elevates our credibility of agencies and demonstrate a commitment of excellence and public trust and continuous improvement. So again, why accreditation? It improves staff training and professional development. Accreditation usually requires ongoing training, ongoing policy review, and continuous improvement. Staff often becomes more knowledgeable due to these trainings, and they become more professional in their roles. The accreditation process often identifies the strengths and the weaknesses in the program. It just identifies the gaps in operation. It identifies any outdated policies or procedures. And it shows the inefficiencies and also gives us the training needs. Um, and looking at defense against outside interests, accredited agencies like myself in Mecklenburg, it often put us in a better position to defend our practices, meaning that we can show outside agencies that we are nationally recognized and we are using the best practice standards from NAPSA, which is nationally recognized. This can help reduce our legal exposure, any safety concerns or any operation areas or compliance issues. The accreditation process, it helps agencies be consistent in their policies, in their procedures, in their documentation, and also in the operational practices. This can reduce a lot of confusion, improve service delivery across the organization. By being accredited, employees often feel more confident and supported when working within a well-structured and professional environment. And just to say, accreditation is not a one-time event. Agencies must maintain their standards and definitely continue to undergo review, which promotes a culture of ongoing improvement. Accreditation, definitely shows the community, it shows our courts, it shows our stakeholders and our partner agencies that the organization follows recognized best practices and professional standards. It demonstrates accountability and transparency. And I say that because, going through the process of getting accredited, you go through all of your policies and procedures internally, and you also have those external assessors come in and look at those policies and procedures as well, just to see, if there's anything that you have missed. But definitely Ed will take over from here, and he will just talk about the standards and how the standards are set up.
All right, thank you, James. So for the remainder of our time before we get to kind of just open question section, I'm going to break down really what the standards look like, how they're organized, what you can expect as you're looking through them. All the standards, as well as some of the manuals for the accreditation process, can all be found on the NAPSA website. But I'm gonna try and go through those a little bit, and then after that, kind of talk about what it actually looks like day to day for a team that's actually interested in or going through actively the process of accreditation. So, to start out, the accreditation standards are broken down into four sections. I promise myself every time I do this presentation that I'm going to actually count the number of standards, and I have yet to actually do that, but it's around 40 total, right around 10 per section. So what I'm going to do here is talk about the first two sections. I'm going to show you a few examples of standards themselves and some things that we look for, what you would have to provide as the accreditation team on the ground, and sort of what James and I or the other auditors, assessors would be looking for as we work with you in the accreditation process. So the first two sections, section one are the personnel practices. This is largely HR related items, recruiting, hiring, background investigations, training, certification. Um, those sorts of things all fall within section one. I'll show you a few examples of standards from section one in a second. And then section two is more of your organizational management and structure, your mission, vision, goals, a lot of discussion about the data system you use to collect and report out on data, policies and procedures, public reporting, things like that. Sections three and four, which I'll get to in a little bit, are really more of the meat of what we're all used to when we think about pretrial on a day-to-day basis. So that would be our screening and our supervision strategies. So we'll get to that in just a little bit, but I'm going to forward on. Okay. So this, if you go to the NAPSA website, pull down the accreditation standards, you will find them all in an individual sheet that looks very much like this. And I'm actually going to, let's see if, oh, look at that. My 12-year-old helped me by adding these arrows that pop up. So I was very excited to get some technical assistance from my middle school kid. But so the standards themselves all appear up here. This is the standard and all of the sub elements that are going to be underneath it. Um, this particular standard is just general HR policies. This one is very straightforward, exactly what you'd expect. And what we're always looking for, and I'm going to go down here, is a written protocol. And so what we want to see is that there's an actual, it's not just that you do these things, but that you actually have a written protocol that has been distributed to staff. Staff know where to find this protocol, and it's somewhere or policy somewhere within your daily operations. This particular one is looking for a written policy that's available to all employees, and it has all sorts of things such as your recruitment, your job descriptions, all the way down through your whistleblower policies, grievance procedures, etc. So what we're looking for, and we'll get to sort of the process, but what we'd be looking for is a policy that, hits the general, but also the specifics of each one of these A through G sub elements here. So we're going to review that. And then the next thing we look for are what we call process indicators, and they appear down here in all the standards. This is specifically what we need to see in order to indicate to us that not only does the policy exist, but it's also being practiced on a day-to-day basis. We all have been in places where a policy exists, hasn't been updated for 15 years, isn't even relevant anymore. A good example when we were looking, I saw a policy at one point, years and years ago now, but talked about BlackBerry devices, and it was the only smartphone at the time when the policy was written was the BlackBerry device. So it was clearly out of date, and so what we did is worked with that jurisdiction to update that particular policy. But so for this one, the HR policies, we're looking for job descriptions. So we want to see actual copies of job descriptions for each pretrial services job. And then staff interviews. I'll get to this a little bit later, but the staff interviews would actually come into play when we come on site for the site visit. So that's something I'll chat about in a little bit. I got two more standard examples to show real quick. Again, we have the standard. This particular one is about NAPSA certification. And in this standard, it says that at the time of initial accreditation, anytime thereafter, at least 30% of the pretrial service employees are currently certified pretrial professionals through NAPSA. So for this one, we want to see again a policy that requires at least 30%. Most jurisdictions, in my experience, actually require quite a bit higher than 30%, but the standard is at least 30%. So we want to see that written policy and procedure. And then as far as process indicators for this one, we're looking for documentation of staff certifications, which you can reach out to Wendy. She can oftentimes just pull that down from their records. A lot of times it's just photocopies or PDFs of the actual certificates themselves. When we come on site, we often will go through personnel records, obviously with permission. And then, like I mentioned already, the NAPSA certification records for this one. So those are both examples from sort of the HR, which is that section one of the four sections of the standards. Um, this is the last example for these first two. This one actually comes from section two. And this one is really about the pretrial services mission statement. Most agencies have some sort of mission statement. Some agencies would have a mission statement that's really, some pretrial operations are part of either a probation and parole department or a sheriff's department or the courts. And so what we're actually looking for is something that is a mission statement specific to the pretrial service operation. And so we want a policy, as silly as it seems, we want a policy that says that we have a mission and this is what that mission is. Sometimes it says how often that mission will be revisited to make sure that it's still accurate and really comports with what the current practices and goals of the team are. And then as far as process indicators, we put this one in here because what we're actually looking for is proof that you have a mission statement and proof of distribution that it's somewhere where people can see it. And as silly as it seems, oftentimes what most jurisdictions have done is just taken a photo of and uploaded it to us, showing that the mission statement is hanging above the front desk reception area as you come into their offices. So that would be, obviously the policies in place, but then the process indicator shows that there is a mission statement, that people are aware of it, and that it's visible to folks. So those are the first two sections and some examples. Moving on, there are the last two sections. So section three is about screening and assessment. And again, this is where we really get into the meat and potatoes of the work that most of our staff do day in and day out. So section three with screening and assessment, we're talking about risk assessment validation, defendant interviews, population management, court presentation. And then section four is about defendant supervision. So the supervision options, sanctions, defendant rights, violation management, drug testing, case reviews, things along those lines. And again, I've got a couple examples, I think three of them, that show some accreditation standards that speak to these two sections. So the first one here, this is actually standard 3.05, which is about jail population review. And so it just requires the review of the pretrial jail population periodically to identify defendants who qualify for pretrial release pending case disposition. And so this is really, we want to see that you have some process in place to ensure that folks aren't slipping through the cracks, that, sometimes there's that initial screening and sort of net that you can capture people right at initial appearance and slot them into pretrial supervision. But we also want to make sure sometimes people have detainers that get dropped. Sometimes people have holds for other reasons, maybe finishing up sentences from other convictions. And we want to make sure that you have a process in place that actually will ensure that you are identifying folks who may be eligible for pretrial release and pretrial supervision later down the process as well. So this one, again, we're looking for a policy that speaks specifically to the elements of the standard. And then the process indicators for this particular one is we actually want to see documentation of periodic review of detainees. Oftentimes that's just jail booking logs or some sort of ongoing communication with your sheriff's department, things along those lines. And we do want to see actual live, typically recent logs to see that this is actually taking place. When we come on site, and I'll talk about the site visit in a little bit again, but we're looking at case files, and then we're going to interview some of your staff as well to see how does this work in practice, just to ensure again that the day-to-day practice is in alignment with the policy that is written. So two more for you real quick. 3.06 here. This one is about sort of the information that you provide to a defendant prior to the interview itself. And we want to see again that there's a policy in place and that policy actually hits on A through F here. So we want to obviously the interviewer name, but even, such things as the interview being voluntary, that the interview is, sort of the purpose of it. It's intended to assist in the determination of appropriate pretrial release decisions. You're informing the defendant of who's going to get a copy of the interview, and any other purposes that the interview being gathered might be used for. And this is really to just ensure that the interview is being used purely for, the purposes of gathering information for risk assessment, and then if there are other uses for that information, that the defendant knows what those are, and that person gives sort of informed consent as to whether they want to participate in the interview. Again, we want a policy that hits on A through F. And the process indicators here, again, are staff interviews when we come on site, as well as observation of defendant interviews. And almost every time we've done an on-site visit, we do spend some time watching it, whether it happens in the jail or in the office or sometimes right in the courtroom. We actually observe some of the defendant interviews and make sure that things, not only the policy states that all these things happen, but this is actually how a pretrial services case manager, officer, whatever they're called in your jurisdiction, actually how they interact with a defendant at the time of the interview. And one last example for you. This is from section 4. So again, this is about the supervision itself. This one is really looking to identify or ensure that there's a continuum of intensity. So really varied supervision strategies based typically tied to risk levels. And so this is one that we put in here. Obviously, we want a written policy that's in line with the standard here. I'll let you read that. The process indicators here, we're going to look at court reports. We're going to look at recommendations that are made. We're going to review files. We're going to interview staff. This one, though, I wanted to also point out the random judicial interviews. We typically, when we're on site, meet with, one, sometimes up to, two or three judges to talk to them about the various uses of the information that they provide, the helpfulness of it, the quality of that information, what information they could use that they're not currently getting, just really engaging them in a conversation. In that conversation with those judges, though, we're always talking about what are your supervision strategies, how are those decided? And one thing I did want to point out in this one, there's my red arrow again, is that some standards are mandatory. Some of them are mandatory. I forget the terminology we use, but there are some optional or not necessarily mandatory. And then this is an example of one that's mandatory or not applicable. There are some jurisdictions that provide pretrial services that only do the interview, and maybe it's just court reminders through an automated system. There's no direct supervision services in a few jurisdictions. So this is an example of one where, it really is specific to your jurisdiction as to whether or not this standard needs to apply or how it would apply. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go down. One thing you'll notice too, as you go through, some of them say mandatory. If there is a reason that your jurisdiction doesn't meet a certain standard, and it does say it's a mandatory standard. Before you assume that you're not eligible for accreditation, reach out to us and let's talk. Oftentimes, there's a couple reasons that can happen. Some of them are that there's, state law that is contradictory to a particular standard. We can work with you. We can have the commission evaluate it. We can have the commission take a vote on an exception based on something that's out of the control of the local jurisdiction. As well as, there may be things that you don't have in place quite yet, but are in the works, maybe coming down the road. And if you look at the accreditation manual, which is on the website as well, even those that are listed as mandatory, if it's something that's in process, you don't have to necessarily wait to start the accreditation process till that's in place. You can submit typically a letter indicating what the timeline is, what's happening, what that's going to look like once it's implemented. And usually we can check off that standard, even if it's not currently in place. So again, don't assume if you don't currently meet something that you can't reach out to us to find out if that's something that we can either make an exception for. I can't obviously promise it, but we will take it to the commission and we'll all chat about it and get back to you pretty quickly with an answer. So now I'm going to jump into the 5 stages of NAPSA accreditation. And then the last thing I'll do after I go through these quickly is to really walk through really this applicant status and then the correspondent and candidate statuses in just a little bit more detail so that you know what will it actually look like as you reach out to us from now watching this webinar, all the way through going through and being granted accreditation if your agency is eligible. So the 5 stages, the first one is the applicant status. Really, that's where we're trying to make sure that you are not going to go down this road only to find that you run up against a barrier you can't overcome. We also want to make sure that you understand the amount of work that goes into this and that you're ready for that. There's obviously some expense tied to this, which we can chat about. It's typically the first question we see in the Q&A, so we will touch on that one. But that's really the goal in the applicant status is it's sort of for you to weed out whether this is the right process for you, and that you'll be successful if you do go down that road, as well as us to provide some reality testing as to what you're looking at if you go into the accreditation process. Once we get through that, and again, I'll go into the details of the applicant status in just a moment. Then you get into the correspondent status. That's where you'll have 2 assessors assigned, sometimes a trainee assessor, as well. We'll put a work plan together, and that's really where you're having back and forth communication with us, going through each standard one by one, uploading the policies, uploading the process indicators, getting feedback from us, maybe redoing a few things. And then once we get through that, and again, I have a slide on this particular section, so I'm not going to go into it too much here. The third stage, I should say, is the candidate status. That's actually really where we come on and do the site visit. So again, most agencies, by the time we get through the correspondent status, if there has been any problems that we don't think are going to be resolved in the site visit, I think we would be having some serious conversations short of that. We have done this long enough and have had enough conversations and know the standards well enough that through the applicant status phase, we will probably be able to help identify anything that's going to be a major roadblock to you. And then obviously as we work through the correspondent status, we'll definitely, you'll know if there's any problems. So by the time we come on site for the candidate status, in this third stage, we really have pretty much it's checking off boxes to make sure that that's when the conversations with staff, that's when the conversations with judges are happening. We'll meet with your prosecutors, some defense bar, we'll meet with your pretrial staff, obviously, jail-based, community-based, whatever that may be. Oftentimes we're talking with county board folks, others in local government. I think we've had a few media involved at different times. And before I jump on to well, actually, let me get back to that. I don't want to go too far into the site visit, but let me finish with these 5 stages here. Once we get through the site visit and that stage, we will grant accreditation, and that accreditation actually is in place for 3 years at a time. So that's the fourth stage is an fully accredited agency. You make it onto our list during the beginning of this PowerPoint deck. And then the fifth stage is reaccreditation, which is at the end of year 2, we start the process over again to go through and do reaccreditation, which looks very similar to the initial accreditation, but we're actually at that point looking for evidence of following the policies over each of the 3 years of accreditation that has been in place. I know that was sort of high level. I have 2 slides here where I'm going to talk about just that first stage, which is that sort of initial inquiry to the contract. And then I'll talk about what the actual real work looks like during that correspondent stage. So the process, if you are interested in going forward with accreditation, your first thing you're going to want to do is reach out to us, Sean LaGrega, who's manning our Q&A section right now is a primary contact, but both James and I have our contact information at the end of this slide, or Wendy obviously is a good person to reach out to. Any of us you reach out to and want to have a conversation, we're happy to jump onto a call with you. We're happy to, answer any questions you may have. And if you are interested in actually being considered to move forward, we'll ask you to start submitting some information just about your jurisdictional landscape. Something I learned very quickly, especially now that I work in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, is there are differences in the legal system that we really want to make sure that we understand how things operate in your particular jurisdiction. We're not experts in your state law or your local policies and practices. So we are going to ask about things, the population size you deal with, the number of staff you have, even the types of you know cases that are being filed in your jurisdiction, what some of the difficulties have been, whether they're politically, financially, things like that. So we really want to get a sense of who you are, who your jurisdiction is, so that we can really help to guide these conversations going forward. Something that you don't, and these don't have to go in this order, and something I would encourage anyone interested in accreditation in starting as soon as you're interested in this process, is to really go through a self-assessment. And by that, I mean each standard, one by one, sit down, chunk them out into 5 or 10 every couple weeks, get a little team together, and really read through each one of those policy requirements, each one of those process indicators, and determine are there any areas that you see might be problematic for your jurisdiction. Again, if there are some, bring those to us and have a conversation with us. Don't assume that the process is dead in the water at that point. We would very much like to talk through those issues with you, so that you don't weed yourself out unnecessarily. And then we'll have those conversations back and forth. And if it makes sense to move forward, we'll provide a cost estimate to you, and then you'll enter into a contract with NAPSA directly. And so just to probably short circuit the question that I know is coming, the costs for these, and Sean, I'll see if you want to unmute your mic as to where we're at with these typically. I'll give you a couple more seconds. There he is.
Hey, Ed, thank you for having me this afternoon. So typically what we're seeing for jurisdictions is that the cost for accreditation is running about $6,000 per year. So about $18,000 over a 3-year process. On top of that, there's also going to be the costs for the site visit. So that includes the travel per diem, the assessor's fees, and so on. So definitely, when it comes to fiscal planning, definitely conversations that we can certainly have. We can talk with Wendy at NAPSA sort of about what the billing looks like, whether it's going to be over a period of 1 year or all up front and so on. So we definitely have some willingness to work with jurisdictions when it comes to determining whether or not this process is fiscally viable.
Thank you, Sean. I owe you lunch. I threw you out there without giving you any heads up on that, so appreciate that. So yes, once that contract moves forward, we move into that second stage. And this again is real where the real work is. And I actually pulled up our participant lists, and I see a few of our friends from Lewis and Clark County in Montana are on. So they are deep in the heart of this right now. I believe Oklahoma City is as well. But this is really where the bulk of the work is for you and your team. And so I just want to talk through what that actually looks like. What you are going to be doing is, and we usually chunk it out by section. It doesn't have to be sections 1 through 4 in that order. Sometimes we jump around. But really, we set up some online folders, and you actually upload copies of your policy. You upload evidence of compliance with that policy, whether that's jail booking logs, like I mentioned earlier, whether that's photos of your mission statement, definitely screen grabs of your data system that you enter all your information into, reports that you provide to your judges, things along those lines. And so we will spend, it's usually, I think the fastest we've done it is probably 3 or 4 months. Typically, it's probably about 6 months. We've definitely gone longer. We actually will work at the pace that makes sense for you. It is quite a bit of work. And so know that one thing I would absolutely advise is that you pull a team together. This is difficult work for one person. It's nice when you have a partner to do it with. Sometimes even a group is helpful. Um, but definitely, it's a bit of a lift to add to your already probably overburdened work life, to put this on one person. So you definitely want a local team to help you out, at least one other person. And what we'll do is we'll set up, some conversations. We're available at all times for you to ask any questions. And you'll upload the information. The two assessors will spend some time with that documentation, and then come back and set up a meeting with you and talk through, ask questions, ask for additional evidence of process indicators and compliance. Ask for some adjustments to policies. Sometimes we have policies that are either missing a sub-element or aren't completely encompassing the accreditation standard. And it's just really a back and forth for a good number of months there. And that's really the heavy lift on that part of you who are going through the process. Once we get through all four of those sections and we feel like everything that we can do remotely has been accomplished and checked off, that's when we jump into the site visit. We come on site. It's usually it really depends on the jurisdiction. It's usually at least a full day and a half. More typically 2 days, sometimes even longer, up to 3 days, depending on your jurisdiction, depending on how many conversations we have to have with different individuals, how many things we need to see. And then we go back and work on, once everything's checked off, then we start working on a report. It's a pretty detailed report that we put together. The two assessors will then submit that report to the NAPSA Accreditation Commission, who will, sometimes has some additional questions. We have had to go back to the jurisdiction to get some things clarified, and then they will actually vote and to formally approve the accreditation, and a 3-year certificate of accreditation is then awarded. Actually, as a framed certificate, you hang it on your wall. All the jurisdictions I've worked with, at least, are very proud of it. Put it right, usually in the entranceway there. So it's a lot of work. It is something definitely to be proud of. Um, that is the bulk of the work there. Um, and then post accreditation. So once you're accredited, there is annual review of that we ask for. Really, we just want to make sure that nothing's changed in your jurisdiction, nothing's slid away from the standards, that things are still being abided by. It's also a great time for you to update us on any changes that have happened with you locally. The most probably prominent example of a shift in the middle of an accreditation was DeKalb County, Illinois. Did Went through the entire accreditation process. It was one of my first projects that I worked on. And then I think it was after their first or going into their second reaccreditation. That's when the bail laws were the cash bail was eliminated statewide in Illinois. So for us as assessors, it was really fascinating to see how did that impact DeKalb County? Did it impact any of their standards? Did they have to change any of their policies and compliance to be in compliance with that? And it was, fascinating. Wendy is an excellent person to talk to if you want to know more about the changing laws in Illinois, being from there herself. But so that was something that, we had an annual conference call. We want to make sure that we're available if there are any issues that come up, changes to the law, changes to operations. Sometimes it's changes to support for pretrial services. Those are places that we can have a conversation about that. We can help guide things, and also just continue to act as a resource for you. There's always ongoing technical assistance available, always issue spotting that we're available to do. And then, at the end of year two, I think is typically where we started, but that's where we start to plan and prepare for reaccreditation. And I should point out, reaccreditation it seems like it would be a little bit of a lower lift, but oftentimes it's at least as much work as the initial accreditation. I just want to be completely transparent about that. And the reason for that, and I may have mentioned this earlier, but we're really looking for not only that the policy is in place, and it probably is, and may have to be adjusted somewhat, but also that it was being followed throughout each year of the accreditation. So for a defendant interview, we want to see a completed defendant interview in year one, year two, and then the beginning of year three of that accreditation. So the process indicator side, it's quite a bit more work that has to go into preparing that and submitting that to us. So, couple little things I just want to mention. One is that the Accreditation Commission is actually meeting in person next month down in Florida. We are going to be reviewing the entire process. We're going to be reviewing the accreditation standards themselves. There's some things that we've noticed over the years that are, can cause some confusion. We just want to make sure that those are clarified. There will be likely edits to the accreditation standards themselves. I just want to put that out there so that you know that things are likely to be adjusted. We're more than likely going to be in a place we're hoping to announce any standard changes or any changes to the process around the conference this year or shortly thereafter. But we definitely would not pull the wool out from anybody under anybody's. I think I'm mixing metaphors there, but we won't put anybody down this process and then change things in a way that would affect your ability to go forward with accreditation. So we'll be thinking about these things. Any conversations we're having with the sites that are currently seeking accreditation or thinking about seeking accreditation, we'll be very upfront about any changes that may impact your jurisdiction. Um, and one other thing I wanted to talk about. We currently have a good mix of types of jurisdictions that are accredited. We have single site, so DeKalb County, Illinois, Alachua County, Florida, Mecklenburg, where James is from. These are jurisdictions that are single county. They are, we come on site, we're working with one local unit of government, one local pretrial office, and that's a pretty straightforward accreditation. But we also have been able to accommodate and do accommodate different forms. James mentioned that one of the accredited sites right now is the state of Connecticut. It's a statewide organization accreditation. The nice thing I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, and I didn't do any of the Connecticut work, but they have uniform pretrial policies across the state. And so one thing that we do in order to accredit it statewide is we have to go to multiple sites to make sure that the policies that are being followed in a similar way at multiple jurisdictions. We usually, within that state, I don't remember the name or the number of sites that we actually, or counties that we go to, but that site visit tends to be a little bit longer because there is some additional travel involved and some additional sites we need to see. But there's also jurisdictions that have not that multiple, excuse me, we do have accredited agencies like Maine Pretrial Services, which actually Sean works at, that has multiple counties throughout the state of Maine, for example, with him. And they may have slightly different policies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So we can accommodate different types of organizations. So if yours seems like it falls outside of the traditional cookie cutter of a single site or a statewide, give us a call. My organization, we have different policies throughout the state of Wisconsin and Minnesota. We have different laws in the three states that affect pretrial operations differently. So those are things that we're constantly talking through. Also things that we're going to be talking about when the commission meets next month. Um, and so I think that was all the points that I had. I'm going to pop up the next slide, which is just our contact information. Um, this is mine as well as James. Also, I'd encourage you to reach out to either Wendy or Sean LaGrega. Um, all of us are available and interested in talking to anybody who wants to go through some or have some conversations about what this would look like for your particular jurisdiction. And also, I promised Wendy I would mention that we do have this QR code. We would love any feedback whatsoever on accreditation on this presentation through that QR code right there that you can point your camera at. So. James, is there anything I was missing that you wanted to touch on?
And I think you covered everything very well. Um, I would just say, being on both sides of the fence, being an accredited agency and also, helping others to get accredited, is a very meaningful thing when you're going into your policies. Most of the time, you have these policies in place. You just have to refine some of those policies and to get them aligned to the standards, to the NAPSA standards. But um, your self-assessment is probably one of the biggest things that you can do before getting involved or making that call to to the assessors. Just go through the standards, pull them up, and just self-assess your program and see how it's going.
Hmm.
And like Ed said, reaccreditation is probably the heaviest lift. Just finding, getting those 3 years of information is tough. We have a team here in Mecklenburg. We try to get all the information yearly. So we get that information yearly, get it uploaded. So when the reaccreditation come, that's all we have to do is send that link to the assessor. So it makes it much easier when it comes to that, instead of waiting 3 years and trying to go back and pull information. But other than that, we're definitely open for any questions or any questions in the Q&A section.
And one thing I just wanted to add quickly, more often than not, the agencies we've talked to have all of the standards essentially in place, but oftentimes are missing a written policy that speaks to that. We all have these, everybody in the agency knows how something happens, but there's no actual policy stating that this is how it should happen. Rather than your agency having to start from scratch and write a policy, just opening up a Word document and starting to write. We have access to example policies for every one of these standards, multiple examples. And I know all of the partner agencies that we've worked with are happy to allow us to share. We usually just, redact out some of the basic information about where it's from, but we have many sample policies. So even if there are things that your policy may not speak to and you want to see how it's been handled in other jurisdictions, please reach out to us. We're happy to share some examples for you so it's not as difficult to lift on your end. So, Sean, did we have any questions that dropped into the Q&A? Or if not, if anybody that's on the presentation right now has some questions, this would be a great time to throw those our way.
We had one question and I hopefully answered it.
Okay. I believe all of us will be at the NAPSA conference in late August, early September this year. We do typically a presentation. It's essentially the same presentation, but we are all congregated in that room around that time. Or if you see any of us throughout the conference, please grab us and we can, grab coffee or just have a quick hallway conversation about any questions that may come up. But again, we're available and our contact information is up on the screen.
Really quickly, this is Wendy. It looks like I'm trying to get there. We don't have that many people raise their hand. Forgive me. It's Sarah. Sarah, I'm going to turn on your ability to talk, and so you can just ask your question. So you should be able to do that now once you unmute yourself. Looks like you're unmuted, Sarah. Go ahead and talk or.
I think I did that in error. I apologize. I didn't mean to do that.
Okay. Well, thank you. For everybody else that is on, though, if you would like to unmute yourself, you can just raise your hand and we can do that. Otherwise, you can always put your questions in the Q&A. Okay, well, I'm going to give it another minute or two while I just go over some final announcements. So if you have a question, it's not too late. You can put that in the Q&A. You can also raise your hand. But in case there are no more questions, just to kind of wrap things up, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much to Ed and James and Sean for lending their time and their expertise and their passion to being here today, and also in all the work and support that they provide the Accreditation Commission and so many jurisdictions throughout the country who are interested in accreditation and just interested in making their program as good as it can be. So thank you very much for that. Again, we have registration open for the conference that starts in August. Hopefully you'll be able to join us in Reno. Lots of information available on our website, www.napsa.org. We also have scholarships for the conference that are currently accepting applications through May 27th, as well as award nominations being accepted through May 27th. Again, we have another webinar coming up on Pretrial 101 that is next month. All of that information, again, is available on our website. And seeing no more questions, I wanted to check in with Ed and James and Sean. Any other last pieces you guys want to say?
I think for me, I want to just thank Ed and James for conducting this workshop today. It's a great opportunity for us to sort of get the word out and start to educate the field about how the accreditation process works, and really sort of the importance of looking at sort of exploring becoming an accredited organization. I'll just put in a plug. It's a great opportunity for jurisdictions to get their operational house in order, and to get your policies and procedures in order, and to sort of really lead you down a path of creating a level of consistency in reviewing those policies and procedures on an annual basis. Policy and procedure is boring and dry for most people. But it's really critical, I think, in working to protect your organizations from liability, outside interests, and so on. So please feel free and reach out to any one of us. I did put my contact information in the chat. You can also contact me via the NAPSA website as well.
Great.
And Sean, just to add to that, one other advantage that we've definitely seen, and another reason that some jurisdictions would be interested in the process, it really provides a level of visibility for your program and for pretrial operations in general. I think we've all had that experience where, we've talked with members of the general public, but more shockingly, sometimes our county, government officials who aren't really aware of what pretrial services are, what we do, what function we serve, how we support, community safety, as well as maximizing, people's rights during the pretrial phase of their case. And so it's really an opportunity for us, especially when we come on site and the report that we generate, to really make sure that your work is visible, that you receive the support you need. We've been very strategic on our site visits with some jurisdictions to talk with people who are either on the fence or new to county boards, new to sort of decision-making roles within the court system. And it's something that we have really helped to elevate the sort of visibility support, and for various reasons too. Sometimes if there are tight budgets, one area, and I speak from experience on this one, but sometimes, looking at where can we slash, what's this pretrial thing? Let's just slash that out of the budget or reduce its budget. If people understand what it is we do, especially how we can impact cost savings in the short and long run, that's something that I think is very important. And this process really can show that not only are you providing a pretrial service that is a benefit to your community, but also you are accredited and recognized by the national body as being one of the premier agencies within the country, recognized as having met all of the standards for accreditation. So I highly encourage anybody out there that's, ever in those situations, and I think many organizations tend to be at one point or another, to reach out and really consider this as an opportunity for your jurisdiction. So.
Great. All right. Again, thank you, Ed. Thank you, James. Thank you, Sean. And thank you all for being here with us today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.